Hello, hello to my True Blue crew. I think we have everything set up and we are ready to go. I'm so excited today because I figured out my camera situation and I can show you my workspace. So, adjusting here, you can see just a tiny bit of my laptop there in the workspace area, but I've got my machine here and I have a workspace set up to the side of my machine. I'm sure this is pretty typical for most people, but I have a cutting mat. I've got all my tools, all the pieces and parts of this project. You can see the pattern here. And the way I have my room set up, I have another table behind my desk where I keep my sewing machine, and I have a big cutting mat on that. So I have a depth of work area here. But you can see the pattern. We're working on the Woven Hearts quilt along from Fat Quarter Shop. And I am ready to put some rows together. So I have all my pieces cut and I'm gonna start sewing. The pattern is a paper foundation paper piece. You can see some of the parts here, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I just want to get going on this project. We're about halfway through my pieces and parts, but the quilt along has been going since the first part of October, and we're going to wrap up here in a couple weeks. So I need to get this main bulk of the heart, all the blocks together. I was counting and I have 33 blocks to make for the center of the quilt. So that's going to take some dedicated effort here. So while I am sewing my pieces and parts together, this is one of the foundation paper pieced woven star blocks that I've been working on over the last couple weeks. And I'm excited to get them all together. I'm so glad you have stopped by to spend a little bit of your Saturday with me. Drop your name and where you are from in the comments. I love to meet all these quilters that join us from around the world. I am in Phoenix, Arizona, and we went straight from summer to winter. We were having a long, long stretch of 100-degree days, triple digits for months on end. And it finally cooled off, but it immediately dropped to like the 60s and 70s, which is frigid for us desert dwellers. And I talk to people from Minnesota, upstate New York, and they just laugh at me. They're like, oh, 60s, I'll be outside in shorts and a t-shirt. And I am wearing a t-shirt, fabulous True Blue Crew t-shirt that you can get at truebluequilts.com. But we tend to bundle up when it starts getting down in those 70s. Just a light sweater, you know, take it everywhere. Okay, so I am working on the second row of my project, and last night I was putting together my quadrants. So I've got these all done, and when I clear off the workspace here a little bit with these rows, I can get back to assembling some blocks. Oops. Go. But I need to I've just counted off my blocks for this row, and I am going to chain piece them until we've got the whole row together. Let me know if you're hearing an echo on the broadcast. It's kind of tricky to get things all aligned and working, and I'm hearing an echo, but it's very, very faint, and I think it's just because I'm in the same room with my other camera. But if you can hear an echo and it's distracting, let me know, and we will do something different with the sound here. Okay, so this group is actually going to be, there's some of my stars. I'm trying to keep them real scrappy, but then I get, so this is like a scrappy block. I just grabbed the different fabrics from the collection I'm using. This one I planned a little more. I put all the purples as the long star pieces, and then I put the peach and orange as the star points. And it's, you know, it keeps the project interesting for me to plan out that placement of the fabrics a little more. But it does kind of slow things down as you make lots of decisions. Now I have to check my rows because I have 3 together there. Okay. And I am not pinning at this point. I'm just putting the pieces together in the horizontal row, and all the blocks are the same size. And so I just match up the pieces and sew them together. I don't really need a pin in there for that step. Nothing's really shifting or moving. I can keep it lined up. So there you can see the row with some background. Whoops. Okay, so this is I've sewn one end of the row. Here's the other end of the row, and I still need the middle section. So we will set those pieces aside. Luckily, I've got plenty of stuff going on that I can start on the next row, or I could grab one of my little leader ender scraps, and you can see. I wonder what is my other camera froze. That is very odd to just see my hands there in the middle of the workspace. Hang on while I go check that camera. It's all a big experiment today. Okay, now it looks like we're back in action. You can see, or maybe there's a delay. I guess that's just a delay in the feed. So I'm learning along with you. I thank you for your patience as I figure out the technology. There is so much out there now that we can all be on camera sharing our daily lives, but sometimes the tech gets you, and the video teams make it look so easy when you just are watching. You don't realize what's going on behind the scenes to make everything look so effortless. So I am ready for my next row, and this is the top of the heart here that you can see on my pattern. And I've got some background in between these blocks. And the camera is just not keeping up. I don't know what that is all about, but we'll just, gives you something interesting to look at. And I would love to hear from folks in the comments. Let me know that I am not just the crazy quilt lady talking to myself. When I have a complex block next to background fabric, I always put the background fabric on the bottom because that lets me see those seams as they go under the needle. Okay, some questions for folks. What are you working on? Are we doing holiday projects? Hello, Elaine. Thanks for joining us. Always a good day when you can sit and sew a bit. Okay, let's see. I've got a couple pieces here for my next row. But this, excuse me, is the middle piece of the row that I started with. And there are 4 stars together. So I find the piece that I sewed with 3, and then I can add the 4. Oh, wow. Elaine's working on a baby quilt for her great grandson. Well, congratulations. That's wonderful that you have such an extended family. My husband's grandmother lived to be 102. So she got to spend lots of time with great grandkids. That was fabulous. Okay, and then this next row, we have 2 stars together. So I'm going to sew those pieces. And then we can leapfrog back and forth. Here is the other row that has 4 stars and then the little break. And then I've got 2 and 2 to put together. Okay, so that row's done. I need to get some pieces together for this next row. And these 2 stars have a lot of the red fabric, but you can see again, I was doing something a little more scrappy and then something a little more planned. There's the beginning of the long row. This is the very top of the quilt. So these stars will be at the top of the heart that eventually gets all put together. And here is the second row. Very, very difficult to show on screen in this little corner of my room. Okay, so that one is going to sew to those. Okay, so now we are ready to get started on something else. I have been using the scraps that I trim off of the foundation pieces, because these fabrics are larger than the paper, so you end up with scraps, but all the scraps are tiny. These are, probably going to finish at 1.5 inch, half square triangles. And that's great for leader enders. And I've been making these little like piano key pieces just because I hate to throw out such a pile of scraps. But I also, it seems like a waste of time to be trimming and sewing with these. So then I was wondering if I should make a scrap bag and, offer that for sale if there's people out there that would buy this collection of random scraps, little 1x2, or, this was the very end of a fabric strip when I was trimming. So it's a little bit wider, but we'll see. I like I said, I was starting to make just little random scrappy blocks, turn it into a doll blanket or something. Okay, so now I can get this pair of stars attached. Always have to make sure I have my right sides together, which is a little bit tricky with the Moda Grunge that I'm using as background. Very hard to tell right side from wrong side. So there we go on that one. And I will get another one of my little triangle scraps as my leader ender. So I sew my leader enders like that. And then I pair them up to make hourglass blocks. And then these all go in a scrap bin. And I need to work on that project at some point too. Okay, so here, whoops, one more piece. Need a background piece on the end. And then this top row will be done. And then I will need to press these rows before I sew them together. So that will be a reveal later in the week when I get back to the ironing board. We have entered the holiday season now that Halloween has passed, and the big debate is whether you've started listening to Christmas music or if you save that for after Thanksgiving. I tend to wait. Okay, so I can sew this block together. It's already been pinned and it's ready to go. So-and-so is working on Scrappy Celebration. That sounds like a fun project. I love Scrappy, as you can tell from these stars. It's all one line of fabric there, but I have 10 different fabrics to keep rotating in my stars. Yeah, Thanksgiving is wonderful. Do you have any fall decorations that you can put up for Thanksgiving? I love the look of decorated houses that have seasonal things. I am not that with it. I shared a cute little treat that came across my Instagram feed the other day and sent it to my daughter and said, you know, if I was a Martha Stewart type of mom, we would have these little hors d'oeuvres. They were cute little pumpkin pie made out of cheese and Triscuits. It was so cute. Yes, the fall colors are very warm. So, and I love candles, but I love the look of candles. Let me say that because I am very sensitive to smells and I will get headaches if there are a lot of perfumes. So a lot of the scented candles are good for maybe 5 minutes and then I can't stand it anymore. So I don't tend to put them out, but they make such a lovely little display. So I don't know. And then also I was saying we're in Phoenix and we have a lot of ceiling fans and we do run our fans throughout the year. So lit candles and ceiling fans don't tend to mix. So I've got all these excuses for why I don't have a cozy decorated home. But I've got a beautiful wall in my entryway that I could put up seasonal quilts. So maybe someday. And I can't wait for Christmas. I do decorate for that. And most of the time, sometimes I get lazy and don't put things up. But now that life has calmed down, my daughter's in college, and so we don't have all the carpool duties, and so that's been nice. So I feel a little calmer, and we can get things set up for Christmas here in a few weeks. I think that, the weekend after Thanksgiving is a good time to decorate and get the house reset for the holidays. Okay, so now I am back to piecing my woven stars. And I started this the other night, and you can maybe see some of my notes there. I wrote color guidance on the pattern so that I could make one version that was planned and one version that was not. Because with these woven stars, you have to pay attention to which piece is going to make, if you want the same fabrics to connect. Let me see if I had an example. Like on this one, the stripe connects. It makes that woven look when it dips under this other fabric. So you kind of have to plan that part ahead of time. So let me get, and this is why I have this other camera set up, so you can actually see what I'm doing when I am standing up to cut. I just, that's one of my little quirks. I have a hard time cutting when I'm sitting down. So I apologize for the one camera that's just the side of my arm. But we're going to trim those quadrants and get ready to sew some more stars. And then I have to pay attention to the computer over here and catch your comments. Oh, battery operated candles. That's a great idea. Or the YouTube channels that are the fireplace. Those are always fun. I did a better job at fabric placement and don't have as big of scraps on these pieces. So these will go in my fabric waste bag because I have a friend who has a textile recycling plant near her house. And so I just take her the big bags of scraps, and she takes them to this plant that I think uses them for things like mattress stuffing and just whatever they can manufacture that uses fabric scraps. So I feel a little better about that they're not going to sit in a landfill somewhere. That is one thing that I think I'd like to get better at. And I'm kind of critical of our American waste management, I guess, because there's this whole big push for recycling and things. And then I heard that a lot of the recycling plants in America have shut down. And so they still pick up the separate recycling bins, but then they deliver it to the same landfill as your regular trash because they don't have the ability to actually recycle. So they've conditioned all of us to plan for it, but they never follow through on their end, which is disappointing. But there's a lot of things about big business and government that are disappointing if we actually knew what was going on behind the scenes. But I've said before, I want to keep this channel drama free, so we will not get into some of those issues. So tell me what you do with your scraps. What's your waste management plan for, excuse me. Okay, so I've got my little paper scraps that I'm just tossing into the trash. And I'm keeping all the fabric bits to put in the fabric recycling bag. If you clean up as you go, I'm rededicating myself to that principle. The other great thing I have, unfortunately, it's on the other side of town, and Phoenix is such a big city. When I say the other side of town, it's 50 miles away. They have a place called the Art Resource Center that is kind of a thrift store, pay what you want. And there are all sorts of great things there, sewing machines. They've got like small kilns, they've got easels, they've got yarn and knitting needles, crochet hooks, all sorts of, like I said, art resources. And I would love to have something like that on my side of town. And I have thought about doing the research to, kind of open that kind of business for myself. But I don't know if my husband would go for that kind of retail management space. Okay, so I've got that bit sorted. Now I need to figure out where my planned blocks and where my random blocks were. Okay, these are random. So we will, whoops, not quite random, but scrappy. So I still planned to make the purple weave under the orange. So I've got that going. And now I really have to be careful because I have laid out blocks like this and sewn them together. And then I've somehow rotated so that when I open the two halves, they don't go together the way that I had originally imagined it. So I'm trying to be very careful with my sewing and placement. I think it's because somehow I turned it and I sewed the wrong side previously. But again, there's 70 some stars in this quilt. So if some of them don't come out the way I imagined it, no one will ever know. I'll probably forget how I had hoped they would sew together. So the pattern comes with a registration mark, and that's what I am pinning here and checking to make sure that I hit the mark on both sides of the pattern. Okay, and same thing with this one. This one I coordinated the fabrics, so that's why I needed the notes on the back of the pattern. And my workspace camera is lagging. Hopefully it will catch up again. Yeah, Elaine, you had the same thing happen near you. The recycling center closed down. That is disappointing. Okay, camera's caught up to us. So you can see how I planned to make the stripe look like it weaves under this other purple flower, which weaves under the orange daisies, which weaves under the red fabrics. So again, cross your fingers, make sure I am actually pinning the side that needs to be sewn together. Check the placement of my pin. Okay, this one. We are sewing this seam. I am loving these papers from Fat Quarter Shop for the foundations. And they are way over on my table over there, which I'm going to have to reach across here in a second because I get stuff. Organized. Okay, here was the other. This is the very top row of the heart. So we'll have some very colorful stars to start off our pattern. And I'm going to iron these later and sew the long rows together. So I'll do that this afternoon. I'll put it up on my design wall and take a picture to share with everyone. Let me know if there's other paper piecing fans. Thank you so much, Elaine. And I can only see the so-and-so name, so you'll have to remind me what your first name is so that I don't have to keep using your channel name. And I'm guilty of the same thing. When I comment on people's videos, it's True Blue Quilts. So hard to keep track sometimes of all these people's online business identities or channel names versus their And the thing about paper piecing, when I get to this stage, it is very hard to adjust those pieces because obviously the fabric is stiff. And I have been the big question. Hi, Karen. Thank you so much, Karen. I will write that down so I remember. Yeah, my cousin's name is Karen. So yes, I understand where you're coming from when you hate to admit that that's your name. Which is just sad. There's lovely Karens as well as any of us can have those moments when we get a little snippy. Go have a snack. But the paper piecing question, I have a paper piecing pattern and I am looking for printers because I know some people like to do their paper piecing on thinner paper. This paper that Fat Quarter Shop has used for their foundations is actually almost like the printer paper that I run through my home printer, which I use all the time. But I'm wondering if people that are purchasing a pattern would prefer that newsprint thinner paper. And I'm having a difficult time finding a printer that does that because most of them are using, the desktop printers and not the old rolls where newsprint comes on roll. It's been a whole big long research project trying to find a printer for my paper pieced patterns that I would like to use that thinner paper with. And I can't use it. I've got some of the sheets to print at home that are the newsprint thin, but they jam in my printer. So you have to adjust the printer settings. My printer, even with the adjusted settings, still jams up on this paper. So it's quite a hassle. But then I'm wondering if people don't care about the thinner paper, maybe I could just get larger sizes of the regular paper. And that way I could fit more of the templates, the foundations on one big, large piece of paper. So I'll have to investigate that as a backup option. So designer, business owner questions are running through my mind. Okay, so now I can do a reveal of, there is a star, a scrappy one that I was working on earlier this week. So that one's complete. And then I have the planned one here. Did I? Yes, and I kept the fabrics in the right place and sewed the correct seam. So it turns out like I had planned. I really like that. What I'm trying to do when I sew 2 blocks as chain piecing, I do one random and one planned. So that kind of keeps the balance there. I'm a Libra. You have to have both sides of the issue. Thanks for your input, Karen. I'm glad that you are able to use that Carol Duke paper. I think it's just the printer I have, that because if I took it over to my mom's house, but I thought we had the same printer. I don't know. I'll need to get my technical oriented husband to take a look at it and see if we can figure it out, because that's an expensive pad of paper to not be able to use. So I am ripping just the seam, the paper along the seam that I just sewed, so that I can press these seams and sew the next. So the final block together is what I'm trying to say. And I press these seams open. So that gives me a little bit of a weird looking block on the back. I will show you from those finished rows. So when I sew the quadrants together, I finger press all the seams to the next piece of fabric. That's standard when you're paper piecing. But then when I sew the sections together, I press the seams open, because those are a lot of seams, coming together, and that would create a very bulky block. So I've got my seams pressed both ways in this quilt. Some of the seams are pressed open, some of the seams are pressed to the side. And you know what? Doesn't matter. It's all gonna get quilted and stay together and be enjoyed by someone, hopefully for many years to come. But I just like to have these center seams pressed open so that the block doesn't have quite as much bulk there in the center of the star. Okay, there we go. I pinned the center first, and now I will aim for those registration marks and try to keep these fabrics lined up. Okay. Thank you for hanging out with me. I get so much done when I take the time to actually sit at the sewing machine. It's one of those funny things that, you know, to get a project done, you actually have to work on it. So, and they always tell you to remove the pins when you are sewing, but I just go slow and careful, and I manage to sew right over that pin with no problem. And again, I'll take the paper off of that seam and press it open. My camera is delayed on the workspace. I don't know why it freezes. I changed the settings so that the phone would not go to sleep, because that's just my phone sitting on a tripod over there. There, it's caught up to us. Okay, so I ripped that paper off. Pressing the seams open. And I do a lot of finger pressing, and my nails are just long enough to give me some good pressure there. I'm trying to find, I had a tool here, but I don't know what I did with it. You could probably just even take a little ruler and use that to press the edges. Okay, and this one was random. I kept the scrappy purples together. I'm again waiting for the camera to show up on my workspace, that lagging. But here, I'll show it on this camera. There's the scrappy layout. Keeping the colors, it's not totally scrappy and random. I did kind of plan for the colors to be maintain the woven aspect. And I'm just eyeballing on the edge there to make sure I get the center lined up, and then I can use the registration marks on the front and the back to make sure I get the star points to line up. The registration marks help you hit that little corner. And I just put the pin in straight and then double check that it's coming through the correct point. And then I also make sure that my fabrics are lined up, because sometimes the fabric shifts underneath the paper and it's not. So this is how I have my pins. I've got perpendicular, and then I've got one that comes across that open seam, so it helps it lay flat under the needle. That one, I almost hit the pin and my fabric got wonky under the presser foot. So. I have another question for the group. If you are in a quilt guild, are they still having online meetings, or are you completely in person? I am looking forward to a guild presentation this afternoon. We have hired a teacher so that it will be a virtual meeting, which I think is wonderful to be able to have these programs digitally, and it really does help the quilt guilds save money because they don't have the transportation costs. And that being said, I have a couple different presentations for quilt guilds. So if you're looking for a guest speaker, a program, please drop me a note and we can work something out. We've got a couple new faces in the chat. Hello, Rebecca. Hello, Suzanne. You're gonna start on the woven hearts. I'm so excited. Here's the layout on the workspace camera, and there is what one of my finished stars look like. I am using the Laguna Sunrise collection of fabric from Moda, and you can see over here some of the different prints in the collection. It's just got a really nice mix. Welcome from Pittsburgh. And Rebecca likes following the straight lines when she does foundation paper piecing. Yes. And I tell people that think that paper piecing looks hard because there are a lot of really intricate patterns out there that you can do with paper piecing, but you're just sewing short, straight lines, and anybody can do that. So yeah, it's a fun quilting technique. Okay, so next question is, when do you rip off the papers? As you see, I have taken the paper off of my seams when I put the quadrants together, and I decided to go ahead and take the paper off now when I have a full block ready, because then I can press it flat and it makes sewing the rows so much easier when there's no paper to deal with. I think especially this pattern, the pieces on the edge are large enough that I don't think I'm going to have a problem. I usually recommend that you wait until the paper unit has been sewn on all sides, but I just found it too difficult to sew the rows together with all that paper in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and rip the paper off, which is a really fun part of the paper piecing process. It's like tearing paper out of a spiral notebook. It just, when you set your seam a little bit smaller, you just lift up that paper on the edge of your seam and it's perforated, and it's fun. And hearing that little popping sound is almost like bubble wrap when you pop the bubble wrap. one thing I forgot was that it works out much better if I take this long strip along the seam off first. And those pieces will sometimes get a little small and messy when they rip off. And you kind of have to dig in under the intersection there to get all those out. Some people keep tweezers handy when they're taking papers off. Yeah, it takes a while to fall in love with paper piecing sometimes. Yes. Susan, is it Suzanne or Susan? I apologize if I'm saying it right. She is telling us that she uses papers for half square triangles, flying geese, and square in a square. Yes, you can get very accurate results with those. So again, I just lifted the paper out. Once I have that seam off, that corner triangle can come off, and then I can work my way across the section by lifting out the section that's not attached to any other paper. It just kind of pops out of the seam right there. Like I said, I've got these little bits that didn't quite come out that tweezers would help with, but you know, it's those tiny little scraps of paper in the seams. I'm not that worried about. Those will soften up if the quilt is ever washed, and I don't think it will cause a problem. Of course, if you left the paper in, it would be very crunchy and crackly. So we do not do that. So the question was, do you take the paper off when the block is done, or do you wait and take the paper off of the whole quilt at the end? And Susan, let me know about your color scheme for your woven star quilt. You said it's for a friend with breast cancer. So are you making it the pink, or does she have a different color that she would like? Because I had a friend who breast cancer, treated successfully, doing well 10 years later. And she hated the color pink. So she was like, you know what? I don't need any of this breast cancer awareness stuff because I don't like pink. And I thought these would be a much nicer combination of colors. It's still kind of a soft colored quilt. I mean, the red is kind of bold, but I think that's a nice palette there. And you can see the effect of the woven star with that one versus, I don't have a random one handy, but this one is ready to put in the ironing pile. And I will clean up my work area here a little bit, and we will get started from step 1 on the woven star. So Fat Quarter Shop gave us these pads of foundation papers, and I like to do at least 2 at a time because that just makes it easier when I am chain piecing. And I'm going to go ahead and use my rotary cutter on the paper to separate the sections. And I will remember to change the blade when I am done with this project. Okay, so I'm going to do these all random, so I don't need to take any time to plan color placement. The first step is to check your fabric sizes, kind of audition the pieces. So I'm looking at the right side of the paper. I'm laying my fabric square down and I can see through the paper to make sure it covers all of that section 1. So I am going to turn my paper over and make sure that I have my fabric ready with the wrong side of the fabric is going to the wrong side of the paper. And I have a glue stick here. This is just regular washable school glue. And I am going to put a small dab on the paper and then line that fabric up so that it covers, and I have my 1/4 inch, and I'm just lifting it up so that the light shines through and I can make sure it is placed correctly with the seam allowance. And I'm just going to go through and do that with all of my papers. A dab of glue, and then wrong side to wrong side for the prep. Audition. Make sure I got that in the right place, because it is very sad to sew your pieces and realize it did not cover the section that you wanted it to cover. But with the instructions that come along with these foundation pads, it tells you exactly how big to cut your pieces, and they are generous, and so I have not had a problem with the placement and coverage of my woven star. So a glue stick is an essential tool, part of the supplies that you need for paper piecing. I mean, some people, of course, would use a pin and pin the fabric to their paper, but that's one of the things I love about paper piecing is you don't have to worry about so many pins. Yes, I have pins at the final stage when I'm putting my quadrants together, but you don't have to pin every piece on every step. Okay, so I've got those, and I am going to get my, I've got my 4 different, or all my different fabrics here. And then we turn our fabric over, so we're looking at the paper side. And at this stage, I need my cardboard or postcard or 3x5 card, whatever. I've got these nice postcards that I've printed with the paper piecing steps. So drop me a note and I will put one of these in the mail to you if you need a reminder of how to do paper piecing. But what I do with the postcard or the index card is I line it up on the paper to help me fold the line, because all of these lines on our pattern are folding lines, and the postcard or index card that you use helps you get that nice crisp edge. It also gives you a little more bulk to trim, and I just folded the wrong line. I'm sewing 1 to 2, so I need to make sure that that's the line I am working with. And then I need my @1/4 ruler. I've got the nice big one here. The @1/4 ruler has a lip there, and that lip butts right up against the postcard. So that's the other good reason to use a postcard. And then I'm just going to trim any excess fabric away, and that becomes my seam allowance. So then I fold the paper back out flat, and I position my next piece of fabric. And I've done enough of these blocks that I know if I just keep that fabric in line with the edge of the paper, now my fabrics are right side together, and that is ready to sew. I'm going to set that aside and get the next one prepped. So I'm going, at this stage, I'm going to fold, trim, and add my next fabric. We want to get a bunch of these prepped so that we can chain piece our stars. I think I calculated that I need to make 5 blocks a day to get this quilt done by the time it's the quilt along is over. And that's because I did not keep up with the sewing in the early stages. Okay. I'm like, where's the next piece? It's because I prepped all of those pieces. Okay, so I've got my pieces all together, and I'm going to catch up with chat. Susan bought the kit. Yeah, the Dainty Meadow, I think, was the fabric line that was all in soft peaches. That'll be really pretty for the Woven Hearts quilt. And Rebecca is using her stash. That's wonderful. Yeah, if you can get friends to all contribute, how fun. Yeah, these fights against cancer, everybody needs that support. So remind your friends to stay strong. We're praying for everyone who's battling any kind of cancer. Okay, so sewing on the line. I'm just going to line up the printed line with my needle. I am having the paper side up so I can see where I need to sew. And then I'm just going to sew down that line. And again, we are using a short stitch length. So computerized systems, if you usually sew with a 2.5 or a 2, come down to like 1.8 or 1.6. The smaller stitch length just helps you rip the paper off easier. It makes it tough to rip out stitches, but hopefully with careful placement of everything, you will not have that problem. So I've lined the fabrics up, and I just carefully pick them up and take them to the machine. Like I said, I don't need a lot of pins when I am paper piecing. That first fabric was glued to the paper, so it's not going anywhere. And I can carefully pick up the next piece and position it on my machine without anything shifting. But of course, if you need pins that makes you feel more secure, gives you better results, you do what works for you. Okay. And I've got my set of quadrants ready to go. So I'm going to take my scrappy leader ender pieces and get those. Whoops, don't need to sew anymore on that. And run that through the machine, and then I can get all my chain pieced units together. So I asked earlier and didn't hear any answers. Are there any crazy quilters out there that would like this collection of scraps? I am thinking about just keeping all of the scraps from this project, these longer strips from when I was trimming pieces, these smaller little rectangles from when I was trimming. The longer ones came from the fabric when I was cutting these sections to use in the blocks. And then these pieces come when I trim off this fabric. And then, of course, the colored triangle pieces from the, again, trimming the foundations. I started making some scrappy leftover units. I don't know that I have the patience and the desire to sew all of these into piano key sections and keep putting them together. But somebody might like a mindless little project there. So let me know if you think I should keep this as a scrap kit to sell, or if I should just toss the scraps. What would you do? Okay, so I've got all my, whoa, I'm losing my glue stick. I've got my fun little blade saver that I can use to separate all my pieces carefully so that I don't cut any paper or fabric. Okay, let me reach for that. Glue stick is deep in the trash, and I just made it worse. Okay, so now I am going to find another set of 8 fabrics. And then I will start putting those with these. So my rule when I do these random fabric placements is that I do not put the same fabrics touching. And since I've got 3 different colors, I put a different color family. So like I've used red. I'm not going to put a red, even though this is a different fabric, I'm not going to put that next to this one. I'm going to choose a purple for that one. And again, if I line up my fabric with the edge of the paper, I know that I have a big enough piece that I have covered the seam allowance. So I press the fabric, I trim, I add the next piece of fabric, and then I'm ready to sew. Making sure everything's still lined up flat the way it needs to be. So these are those little rectangles that I'm debating if it's worth saving. Miniature things are so cute, but oh, and the other thing that I didn't do on those sections, I lift up that first piece that I had glued there. It makes the paper come up easier at the final stage if you have lifted that glue away. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I lift that first piece, get that glue out of the way, finger press. Fold paper, trim the fabric. Just working, working, working. Oh, look at that. I was able to get all of those fabrics matched up without a struggle. Okay, on that piece, I sewed a little bit into the next piece, the next fabric area. So I just popped those stitches out so that your fabric lies flat and you're ready to go. Last piece, so then I can move all these over. And again, all the fabric's been lined up, so I can just simply turn that over and start sewing. Hi, Jean. Welcome. Yeah, I'm still working on my woven stars. At the beginning of the stream, I was able to sew a couple rows together, and now I'm just making more blocks. What are you working on these days? Okay, we were talking earlier about holiday sewing. So that kind of gives you a deadline. I have a deadline with these blocks because the sew along ends on November 19th, and I had hoped to have my top done by then. And Jean, it sounds like you are closing in on a finish if you're working on cornerstones for the sashing. You've got all your blocks done and you're putting things together. Hi, Carrie. Welcome. What are you working on? So yeah, I need to put some dedicated effort to this quilt over the next couple weeks so that the top can get together by the end of the quilt along. And I've got, then it gets added to the queue for my long arm. So I try to do an hour of work at my long arm every day just so that I can keep things moving. Jean's telling us about the In From the Cold pattern, has big coffee cups. Perfect for this time of year, right? That sounds delightful. Oh, I was going to use here's my little leader enders using my scraps of fabric. So let me grab some more. I tend to snip things off the machine with scissors. I always forget about my thread saver or blade saver thread snipper. Blade saver because you put your old rotary blades in there and then you can use that to snip the threads. Okay, so we are ready for our next section on our pattern, and it is, I've got the star points done, and so these last two sections are background fabric. So I don't always go by the numbers, but today I will. We're on piece 4. So I have to pop those little threads there so the fabric lays down. And this is where those scrappy little triangles come. Again, it just doesn't seem like those are big enough to save, because by the time you put a seam in there, that's barely an inch wide. But tiny things are cute, right? So it's tough to throw it away. Okay, so my triangles are going to go there on the edge, and that's ready to sew. How big of scraps do you all save? That is the burning question in my mind today, is if it is worth it to save these little bits. With this, I haven't done a project that had this many blocks in a long time. There are 70 some stars in this quilt pattern. So if it feels like you have seen me sew the same block over and over and over again, you have. And I am getting a little bored with it myself. Not really bored, because it's gorgeous fabric and it's like potato chips. You don't get bored with potato chips even if you've eaten half the bag. Just one more. But I do like the excitement of a different pattern. Yep, that's one of the ones I hadn't lifted the triangle up, so I can just go in there and get the glue unstuck so that I don't iron over that and then have difficulty taking the paper off. That's a nice big scrap. When I cut the piece bigger, I wasn't paying attention to the pattern and I got a couple chunks that were too big. And that makes a nice big scrap. There's already glue lifted up. Fold the paper, trim the fabric, and add the next piece. So on the line. Okay, guys, I just got my head down. I am working hard to get these blocks done. Sorry that the stream has fallen silent. Hopefully you are chatting in the comments section, entertaining each other. I've been a bad hostess here, trying to get this done. Okay, let me catch up on chat. Jean is saying she keeps everything over 2 inches and throws them into color boxes. That's a good idea. I tend to keep mine, I don't sort them by color, I sort them by size and shape. So like I have all my half square triangles in a basket. I have all my strips in a basket. And Carrie works similarly, cutting scraps into shapes and sizes that I use the most. Things that work in block sizes divisible by 3. There you go. Yeah, I think Bonnie Hunter does a similar thing. So like 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5 would all be good sizes of scraps. And then putting them all in a drawer. Carrie says when the drawer is full, she uses them or gets rid of what she won't use. Yeah, that's a great idea. I need to have a scrappy project day and just crank out a lot of those. One thing I haven't tried yet is using my trimming my pieced units with my AccuQuilt. I probably could do that and just put this over, a 2-inch square or something and run that through. I'll have to play with that. Yeah, I'm thinking, the other thing I was thinking was I could put these small scraps on a sheet of fusible interfacing and then just do some straight line quilting over it. And that would be a quick and easy kind of collage project. I don't know. Still debating that one. And I keep debating, and I'm sitting here ready to sew some scraps as leader enders. So I guess you get your answer there, that I am going to keep using them. Cutting all the threads. So then I kind of have to keep my triangles separate from my rectangles to use up there. Okay, we are ready for our last background corner. You always want to press your pieces that you've already sewn, get them out of the way, get them laying down where they're supposed to be. And then we can trim for the next piece. The other thing I forgot when I was signing up for this quilt along for the Woven Hearts was that my nighttime sewing group, we meet once a month from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. And we didn't meet in October. So I lost a dedicated sewing time when I usually get make a lot of progress on things, because I don't know, I find I sew faster when I'm with a group. I just, you can chit chat, you've got the company as motivation, and that's why I like these second Saturdays so much, because I get a lot done even though I'm chatting with you. I think it just, you're not on your phone scrolling. So, the projects that you work on tend to get done faster. That bigger triangle over in my bigger scrap pile. And then I have to find that textured part of the grunge fabric to make sure I've got right side up. And then this is whenever you have a light background, you have to be very careful that there are no dark threads loose on the back of your blocks. I am working on a project on my long arm that has a light background, and I just dread those spots where I notice in an area that I've already quilted, there was that stray dark thread underneath the light background, and I didn't catch it soon enough to clean it up before I quilted over that spot. Okay. The other thing I've heard of people doing with small scraps like this, like I said, these little rectangles are only like 1 by 2. So that's pretty tiny to use, is they'll use them as stuffing for dog beds and things like that, and then donate those to the animal shelter. I just haven't taken the time to call the animal shelters around me to see if that's something they would use. Just flipping this over to so I can see the paper and sewing on the line. Stacy, so good to see you. She said she couldn't stay because she's at a loud children's party, but I'm glad Stacy from Stacy Lee Creative dropped in. Oh, and Carrie's talking about a leader ender. Yeah, I usually only sew a leader ender piece when I've finished a chain. Um, I can't. I agree with you. She can't go from 2 projects at once, so you have to keep one separate in a basket or something. And that's why it's easy if you've got a bunch of half square triangles, because you don't really have to think about placement of things. When it gets to a point where you're putting different components together, then yes, I would dedicate some time to that project. But my half square triangle leader ender is pretty mindless. Excuse me. Okay, so I've got all 8 of my sections done. So now it's time for another trimming step. This time I am going to trim my quadrants down to their final size. So I've taken any excess that went past the 1/4 inch seam on the pattern. That's what I am trimming away. And as I'm tossing paper into the trash can, I'm remembering that my glue stick is at the bottom of my trash can. So I'll have to dig that out when I get off the live stream. Not that it would be a tragedy to throw away a half-used glue stick. But then the next time I went to do my paper piecing project, I wouldn't have glue and I'd be upset with myself. So then we have a nice clean edge on our star points.
The other thing I have heard people do with these kind of random scraps is they will get that water soluble sheets and just lay all the pieces down on that, put another piece on top, and then free motion quilt. And then you dissolve the water soluble pieces and you've got this beautiful scrappy thread play type of placemat, scarf, all sorts of things. Okay, enough about that. We can start laying out our, get rid of my scraps. Put all my fabric scraps in a bag, and these are going to the textile recycling plant. Oh, you've sewn the leader ender into the quilt row. Carrie can't keep her project separate. Funny, funny. Okay. So something like this, I'm trying to get my random things going. That if I overthink it, it will be too much. And here's the, so there's one. Let's see how the other one looks. See, it's like there's too much purple. But if I put the, there we go. There's the second block. I'm waiting for the workspace camera to catch up. It looks like it's frozen. But we'll just go ahead and let it catch up. Okay. So again, I have to remember which seam I am sewing, because when I put these together, we could sew on two different sides, and I want to keep my, I want my block to turn out the way I auditioned it. So I need to sew on this top edge. And it's not lined up.
pin is rolling around. There we go. This one, I want to sit on this edge. The pieces don't slide around and adjust very well when there's paper attached, so you gotta be careful getting things lined up. And I don't like that. Let's do that. Make sure I've got the correct edge that I want to sew lined up. Hit the registration marks. Make sure those pieces are lined up. Now I'm fiddling with this because I didn't get my fabrics lined up the way I wanted them to. Let me find my little leader ender guy. Was okay, so we've got our half of our star, and I like to take the papers off of the seam when I start putting the blocks together. And then I finger press those seams open for this block. And if you don't have enough of a fingernail, you can use the edge of your ruler there to help get those. Or if you have one of the seam rollers, you'd be able to do it with that. Okay, what are everybody's plans for the rest of this weekend? Is it a long weekend? Do you have Monday off? I am a state employee, so we are observing Veterans Day. And I thank everyone who has served in the military. I come from a military family. I served in the Air Force for a few years myself. I had a great time. I did not have to deploy anywhere. I never got shot at, so I had a pretty easy time during my years of service, but I know there are other women veterans who did not have an easy time, and of course, combat veterans. That's a whole different story. So I thank you for your service, and we remember all those that sacrificed for our freedoms. Okay, getting these stars put together. I'm going to be taking a road trip on Monday. My daughter has to get back to college. She was home for the weekend. So that will be my Monday afternoon. And then we have this one. Again, I line up the middle first, and I just put a pin at a slant across those places where I pinned the seam open. And then I line up the registration marks, check front and back to make sure that I have that aligned. My last little leader ender. And I told myself at one point because you've heard me on this live stream debating, should I save these? Should I continue sewing these scrappy little blocks? And then I was like, you know what? I can throw these scrappy things away while they're loose, or I can throw them away after I've sewn them. It doesn't matter. Yes, sewing the rest of the weekend. Sounds like a fabulous plan, Carrie. I need to balance my time between these blocks and my long arm. And I mentioned we have a virtual guild meeting this afternoon, so I'll be going to that. But I am so happy to have 2 more stars done. So you can see on the workspace camera that I've finished 2 more woven stars. Here, I'll do one of each so you can see. They were both kind of random placement. I made sure that I didn't have similar fabrics touching. And now I can go rip all the papers off. Maybe I'll do that in the background of my virtual guild meeting. But I thank everyone for hanging out with me today. I'm going to end the live stream there, and we will be back on Wednesday, WIP Wednesday, when we sew together and make progress on our unfinished quilts. So I hope to see you all soon. Happy quilting!